I'm Lieutenant General James Swift, Chief of Defence People, and you're listening to Veterans Work, the podcast, a series that explores the myriad of skills and talents that make veterans so valuable in business. Veterans Work, the podcast, grew out of Veterans Work, the UK's leading independent veterans employability campaign. All veterans start as service people, and as the Chief of Defence People, I am responsible for how we select, develop and transition our great people, and I strongly support Veterans Work.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Work, the podcast. I'm Kate Silverton. In today's episode, we look at the incredible quality of resilience, how time in the military can hone it and its application to the business world. I'm joined by Kate Philp, veteran ambassador for the Soldiers Charity and leadership consultant, Matt Johns, veteran and director of Fieri, and Tony Harris, veteran and operations manager for Amazon. Well, welcome to all of you. I'd like to ask at the start, if I may, to just lay out for us your military career and give us a sense of colour in terms of your journey to getting to the point at where you are today. Kate, should we start with you?
Sure. Okay, thanks so much for having me. It's really wonderful to be here. And I think if I can start at sort of age 5, and it's not going to be a full history from then, don't worry, you can shut me up after 40 minutes. I've got this image in my head of a photograph of me with my eldest brother, and we're both in like kiddies soldier outfits. And I'd obviously nicked my middle brother's one. And whereas my eldest brother has got this like beaming smile on his face, I've got this grimace of determination. So it's kind of hard for me to deny that, you know, I didn't want to join the army from quite a young age. But for me, it was about that mix of physical and mental. I grew up with 2 older brothers, quite a tomboy, out in the countryside, building dens with them. And then as I got older, I think that sense of, you know, wanted to do something that I'd be proud of and related to serving my country. Although obviously as a kid, you don't really have that kind of sense, I don't think. So the combination of physical and mental, and then the strong emphasis on team. I loved being in any kind of team environment, and that photograph reminds me that I was probably wanting to be the boss of any team that I was in. So joined Sandhurst after uni, had an amazing year there, really tough obviously, but learned so much and made some incredibly good friends. Commissioned into the Royal Artillery, served for, in total with Sandhurst for about 13 years, a couple of tours of Iraq, and then one of Afghanistan. And Afghanistan in 2008 was when I was injured. So halfway through the tour, the vehicle that I was commanding ran over an IED, so roadside bomb. And sadly, although we were in quite a heavily armoured vehicle, the bomb was big enough and hit at the sweet spot, if you like, not so sweet for us, sadly. And as a result of that, we tragically lost one of the soldiers in the back, and 4 of us were injured. And it's a really good demonstration of the sort of the typical result of an incident like that in terms of fatality and casualties, and the range of casualties from a broken ankle from one of the lads in the infantry company that I was supporting, through to me with losing one leg and one of the Gurkha soldiers losing both of his. We were, you know, CASEVAC'd off the ground, spent an initial sort of 36 hours in Bastion Hospital, where I later found out they thought they'd done enough to save my leg. So I came back to the UK with a big external fixation on it, had some surgery back in Birmingham, had a conversation with my consultant, and he said, actually, your foot and ankle are pretty mashed. He described them as a jigsaw of fractures. So he told me that he could probably try and fuse the ankle, but I'd almost certainly be in pain on a daily basis and walk with a stick. And again, kind of casting my mind back to that photograph of the little girl, that wasn't the future that she envisaged for herself. And I was 30 at the time. I thought, no, I've got a good bit of life to live yet. So assuming there was an alternative, I asked him what that was. And he said, well, we'll amputate. And you've got 2 main fractures, one through the knee and one below. So we'll try below first, because obviously it's pretty handy to keep your knee if we can. And I just remember asking him, okay, well, you know, with a prosthetic, will I be able to run, play tennis and ski? I'm not quite sure why I thought of those 3, and skiing was certainly more kind of outdoors than Antarctica. But he just said yes. And I said, well, that's fine then. And I know that sounds like a very sort of blasé way of telling the story, but that is genuinely the conversation that we had, because partly for me, it was about being able to make that decision, and I could then own that decision But it was also partly because I had confidence in the rehab journey that lay ahead. You know, I think we'll probably all feel the same, those of us who've been injured, that we're very lucky to have had Headley Court, as it was in my day, and now Stamford Hall, where, you know, rehabilitation is second to none. So I knew that I would absolutely be repaired as best as anybody could. So that took me through a period of about 16 months, few trips in and out of hospital for revision surgery, few stints at Headley Court to do my rehab, and then actually went back into service. So I think, you know, a great example of how well somebody can be repaired and what options there are still available. Not the same for every person, obviously. You know, my rank and my CAP badge made a difference in terms of the variety of roles that I could still undertake. But yeah, I carried on serving for about another 7 years, so slightly longer actually post-injury than pre, and then left in 2015 and decided to set up on my own, sort of going into the personal development world of speaking and coaching, which was really what I'd enjoyed most about my time in the army, was developing my soldiers.
Amazing. You give me goosebumps actually when you speak. So to know that because you're a qualified life coach now, a developed career coach, I don't know how you would describe it. So what, just on your day-to-day, before I bring Matt and Tony, what do you do on your day-to-day now then?
So my business is a mixture of keynote speaking and one-to-one coaching. So yeah, life and business coach is my qualification. What does that mean in practice? I like to think about opening up possibilities for people, put it in its broadest sense. Of course, that creates choice, and people are then quite uncomfortable often about making a decision between the choices they have, because that then involves taking responsibility for those choices. And it's something, you know, that I've already mentioned about. Something that I found very helpful was being able to have a choice and control. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. So I really like, through both my personal and professional experience, be able to guide them through that process. And whether that's developing themselves professionally, particularly perhaps in a leadership capacity, because obviously that, you know, plays very closely to my professional background, or if it's more to do with sort of personal challenges and overcoming difficulties, those are sort of the key areas that I work in.
Great. Well, we look forward to hearing what you've got to share with us today then, because that's precisely why we are here, in terms of taking responsibility of our own choices and seeing what might be out there on offer for another future career. Matt, what about you?
How do you follow that?
Yeah, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to set you up. Yeah.
So slightly different in terms of I didn't have any exposure to the military whatsoever. I actually, after uni, I went into journalism sort of very briefly, and then realised it was the doing I wanted to do rather than sort of the narrating of it or the commentating on it. So I went over to South Korea and Japan to cover the World Cup. And whilst I was over there, the only other English speakers were American service personnel. And at that time, it was not that long before that sort of September the 11th had happened, and, you know, geopolitics was sort of right in the centre of everything. And then seeing what they were doing, what they were training, what they were doing, that sort of sense of purpose they had, it made me look for the first time about going into the military. So I went on the internet, found out a little bit about it, ended up going through the tests to go to Sandhurst, and ended up coming back to the UK and going to Sandhurst, not really know what on earth was going on around me. So not emotionally prepared for anything. And just to make it a little bit more surreal, I had Prince Harry in my platoon. So the first thing I saw as I walked into Sandhurst was Prince Charles walking along with his son. So I thought, what am I doing? What on earth am I doing? So huge imposter syndrome, sort of a comprehensive school boy from South Wales, suddenly there at this sort of grand building, going into sort of learning to be an army officer. And it was a really challenging year for me, but sort of very defining as well, about sort of learning about what I couldn't do, what I wanted to do. I went on then to spend 10 years in the Royal Signals as a regular officer, which I really enjoyed. Didn't have sort of quite as a challenging tour as sort of Kate had. I sort of spent three different tours in Afghanistan, a bit of time in East Africa. But the most important role I did was going back to Sandhurst as a leadership instructor, sort of going through the full circle. And then that sort of really got me that passion for developing people, which is the part of the job I really enjoyed. So after that, going into sort of setting up early stages of a business, doing leadership training, which is what we're doing today.
And tell us a little bit more about that before I bring Tony in.
No, certainly. So one of the things at Sandhurst, which was just so rewarding, is seeing people like myself and that transformation over a year. And that's almost addictive, sort of trying to sort of see that development or be involved in it. And then seeing what was happening elsewhere, how that was happening in other businesses, and sort of realising, hold on, I need to get out eventually. I can't stay in the army forever. So if I get out now, I can have a second career. Not that I sort of fell out of love with the military at all. It's just I wanted something that, that stage of life where you start to have a family, you start to want to sort of stay one place, not move around every couple of years. It just seemed like a really good option. And I didn't really want to work for anybody ever again, having been in quite a confined environment of, being told what to do, not having a lot of autonomy. So sort of setting up on my own or with a group of like-minded people seemed like the right thing to do. And the bit about the Sandhurst training, which really sort of I saw had a big effect, was the role modelling. Seeing these sort of fantastic senior NCOs, senior non-commissioned officers who set the example, and how important role modelling was. And also the experiential bit, the fact that a lot of the leadership training we saw commercially was about giving people the knowledge, whilst we were really focusing on the skills and the behaviours. So put people in an environment where they have to lead, and then talk about it and see how you can refine them. So we built it around the experiential and the role modelling bit. So that's what we're still doing today.
Wonderful, and very successfully, although we'll come back to how lockdown has impacted on the business, of course. But again, another chance for you to show that resilience that we talk about. But let's just bring you in, Tony, and hear how you've got to the point where you are today.
Pretty much Kate and Matt have pretty much summed up my journey as well. So again, like Kate, I think right from the age of 4, I got a strong family history in the military, or my father wasn't. I've got 3 brothers, so playing army when growing up. I had uncles in the military, in the French Foreign Legion, watching war films, all that sort of stuff. It just all the way through my childhood, I knew it was what I wanted to do. It was, for me, a lot of it was driven around the kind of courage element and the challenge, the competition. And as I got a bit older, a bit closer to the time, and I'd got a bursary through the military at sort of 16 to go to Sandhurst, it really became about being that final moral line when the chaos and the order are clashing against each other. It's mainly chaos, and you can be in the darkest of hours, you can be that moral light, and you can bring people to safety, you can save people's lives, and you can try and do your best to do that. A large part of it was about leading others. I'd always been more naturally inclined to lead, through cadets, through sports teams, all the rest of it at school. And I really felt like this was my calling. So unfortunately for me, I kind of, in the late 90s, I decided that, Tony Blair made the decision for me, really. University was the thing you had to do, even though I was definitely not suited for university. So I did about a year there, and then joined Sandhurst age 20. So obviously clearly didn't do the degree. At 20, 2 days before Twin Towers got hit. So I had joined very much with the idea that I'd probably be drinking gin in Germany or going to Northern Ireland. That was basically 2 options. I knew I wanted to join the infantry. I wanted to be in a combat arm, and things really came into a sharp focus with the Twin Tower attacks. I spent the first 2 years of my career in the Fusiliers over in Northern Ireland, learning an awful lot about how to lead soldiers. I was very lucky to have joined an infantry unit and joined their fire support company, which is usually where all the old and bold, more challenging soldiers go. So, straight from the get-go, young 21-year-old army officer, you're leading people who are a bit older than you, a bit more long in the tooth and cynical about the military than you. But I learnt a lot. And so in 2005, I went out to Iraq. And that was just the turning point in Basra, where it was going from being benign-ish to suddenly having a lot more influence from Iran, a lot more risk. Certainly saw further north from us in Al-Amara, things were starting to heat up, and then that was naturally seeping down to Basra. And unfortunately, in September 2005, one of my platoon patrols was caught up in a improvised explosive device ambush, which killed 2 of my soldiers, and that was pretty hard. And I think a week later, the call sign got hit again on their second patrol back out. 2 of my soldiers lost a leg each, and an officer in the back was killed. I kind of hit a bit of a dark point at a personal level, not on a professional level, but in a personal level, sort of a lot of what if. What if we'd done this differently? What if we'd done that differently? What if? And it was actually my soldiers who brought me back from there. And I think it's one of the interesting things Matt was sort of talking about, role modelling. The role models around you can not just above you. It's to your left, it's to your right, it's below you. It can be children. I remember at Headley Court, and I'm sure Kate does as well. There was a young girl who'd lost her limbs through meningitis, and she was like charity fundraising for Help for Heroes. And you've got all these hurly-burly, mainly guys, people are trying to recover, and it's this young girl doing all this amazing stuff, and you're like, wow, I wish I could be more like her. So did another couple of tours of Iraq, and then out to Afghanistan a year after Kate to a place called Sangin, which some people might be aware is pretty much the most dangerous place in Afghanistan. And I went with the 2 Rifles battle group. We had a company of Fusiliers attached, and it was on May the 21st. Just been in a firefight out in the desert, trying to sort of stop the influx of fighters into Sangin. And in the aftermath of that firefight, we'd attacked the enemy, and just afterwards, my vehicle, the second vehicle, drove over a mine, and just threw me, exploded right underneath where I was sitting in the Jackal vehicle. The vehicle did a great job. Soaked up all the shrapnel. But the force of the blast was so huge, it threw me about 20 metres from the vehicle. I don't remember a thing about that. I just remember talking to my driver and then waking up and looking at the bright blue sky, wondering what had happened. Unfortunately, the blast wave had shattered both my feet, and I think when I'd landed, clearly I wouldn't have done very well at the Olympics in gymnastics, and didn't nail it, and snapped my left arm in half, and I was bleeding quite heavily from probably my vein, I think, at the time, that had been severed in that. And the guys, it was a really good example, I think, as well, of making sure that you empower your teams and that you devolve decision making, devolve responsibility to the lowest possible level, because the leader, me in that instance, was out of action. I was conscious. I was trying to call over to the team. The driver sitting next to me, he hadn't even moved out of his seat. He was absolutely fine. The gunner in the back, he'd been thrown out. He'd landed on his head. He was a Geordie, so he was fine. And they just very calmly, the driver was on the radio giving all the information, the grid reference, what had happened, everything, just very calmly. And the gunner behind didn't panic, didn't just rush in to try and get me, got the metal detector out and started sweeping very slowly the 20 metres. It took him 2 minutes to go 20 metres because they found 6 more mines between me and the vehicle. And for me, that was that real moment. As an 18 and 19-year-old, not overreacting, staying calm in a crisis, because we'd trained, we'd coached, we'd mentored, all those great things. And this is the thing we do in the military. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of mentoring all the time, even if we don't know we're doing it. And they got to me, jabbed me full of morphine. The irony wasn't lost, being surrounded by opium. And the helicopter came in, exactly like Kate then at that point, 36 hours, and I was surgery in Camp Bastion, and I'm back, and my daughter had been born 2 weeks beforehand, so it's my second child. I'd been born 2 weeks beforehand, and so it was going to be a reunion. I'd never met her, so I was going to go back, meet her, see my family. My wife was really annoyed with me for getting blown up, and then it began that long journey, and sort of similar to Kate's, but I got an infection in my foot quite early on, and so I back and forth between Headley Court and Selly Oak Hospital in Birmingham. Multiple operations, about 30 operations, all sorts of crazy techniques. I started to see guys who'd lost their limbs. Kate was actually there as well at the time. You see people doing incredible things and being able to do so much. And there was me stuck in a wheelchair, or sometimes on crutches, trying to learn to walk before my daughter. And it just wasn't going anywhere. It kept getting worse and worse. And I went for an operation that didn't go well. I lost a lot of blood and ended up in intensive care. For me, that was a turning point. I was like, I don't want to be defined by what I can't do. I just want to be able to get on with my life. I want to be active. I want to not be defined by my physical self, but by the person inside, the mental aspect, and the values that I have as a person. And so it was a pretty easy decision to go, look, take my leg off. If this means I can get back to where I'll be, and I know there are risks. I might be in pain. It might not go well, but they're better than the alternatives. And it was making that choice to do that then kind of turned me around, got me on the course for recovery. So started working on a project to rally and race cars, because you could use technology, you could use things around you, you could compete against able-bodied people, and that was important for me as well. And so we started that, and so Race to Recovery was born, and we did a Top Gear episode, and started learning how to run a business and raise money and sponsorship and marketing and PR and finances. And we took a team of 28 mainly injured service personnel with some civilian experts, because again, you need a diverse team with lots of different skills to help you succeed. And we did the Dakar in January 2013. It was amazing. It's this incredible feeling. Like, so many people going, it can't be done, you won't be able to do it. And you're like, well, okay, fine, you think that, but I'll bet I can, and I'll bet we can. And out of the back of that, I then competed in Invictus. I did very similar things to Kate and Matt, worked with Matt a lot, doing kind of coaching, mentoring, helping others develop. And then for me, there came this real point where I wanted to lead again. I wanted to lead teams, I wanted to lead large teams. And so, there aren't many teams you can get to, or many businesses that are bigger than Amazon at the moment. So I decided to try my hand there in the operations side of things. And it was really a great moment. They're a company that value the military skill set, that understand the ability to put that into many different verticals in the business, be it operations, customer service, whatever it is. And they'll find that strength. And I think one of the great things about the military is it is hugely diverse. There are a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds with very different skills. And you need those skills lined up in the right places. And you also need to recognise what your weaknesses are, what you're not good at, and make sure you've got people around you who are good at those things. And so it's kind of putting that in place there, and using that with my team, and using that experience to say, look, there's not huge differences between what we did, but also leadership is leadership. And it needs different styles, it needs different things for different times. And the benefit of the military is we get a lot of time practicing that, training it, and then really, really, really testing it.
Thank you, firstly. But I was just sort of thinking, if we could just use that as a package as an advertising tool for any and all employers, between the three of you, I think we've just nailed it. Because if I was an employer listening to that, I'd be like, right, okay, if that's what it involves, because I know that people don't fully appreciate. They might think that we understand the journey, but you've all had different journeys, but very similar in many ways. I just think, for me, you epitomise everything that we're talking about, and why a civilian employer would think, I need those people on my team. If I'm listening to this and I'm serving or thinking I'm about to leave, or if I've just left, I might be asking myself, they all sound pretty amazing, incredible, sort of forward-thinking types. When you're when you're mentoring, what are the main questions, concerns, the main challenges that people have in making that successful transition? Is there an element of confidence about it? Is there an element of, things that have come up, I think, in the past few podcasts have been around confidence, around understanding how skills actually translate in the civilian world. These are things that have come up. So if I could take you then and ask you, when you're mentoring, what are the things that you firstly feel that you have to address in helping with that successful transition?
You've got the answer is confidence. And that's not just people leaving the military. We do a lot of work with graduates, apprenticeships, people on high potential leadership programs who've already been identified to be the future leaders of their organisation. It all comes down to confidence. And one of the values I think that we hold quite firmly in the military is humility. And I think sometimes that's a barrier to people actually thinking, hey, I'm a pretty capable human being. I'm not perfect. Not me personally. I'm talking about the sort of the narrative for ex-military. I've done these things. I can take on other challenges. And I think we often look for safety. We'll go to proven routes, or we'll see what other people around us are doing, which is a quite natural thing to do. But I think a lot of people just need to take that moment when they leave and think, hold on, I can pretty much do anything. I've done all these great things, and then just go for it. Take a little bit of risk. Just if you mess up on your first career, then go and do something else. But we get this opportunity in the military, often leaving quite young, to do something different. And it's an opportunity, not a threat. And the more you can think of it like that, the more you just follow your passion, whatever it is that you're going to do. It sounds a little bit corny, but it's true. You've got that opportunity. You've got this amazing experience and training. You've got the support network, which is usually spread all over the place. You can just go for it. And we focus a lot on where maybe it hasn't worked out. But, you know, I'm aware of people who've gone on and studied all sorts of things completely different, working in sort of sustainability, doing incredible stuff in the third sector, or go more proven routes like excelling in the city. But you can do pretty much anything, and just realising that. And sometimes some of the things that are in place to help us in terms of career transition can sometimes push people onto the proven path when actually they sometimes need to break out a little bit and do something a bit different.
I think one of the interesting things, I mean, I do some mentoring internally at business, not just for military people, but for a lot of graduates as well, and people at certain stages of their career. And I think there's kind of 3 core areas I touch on, which I always try and get out early, which is tell me what your values are, and be honest about those. What are they? And a lot of people don't think about this. It's not something they go through at school. It's not something they go through in careers. But really think about what you stand for. Does that, is there a harmony there with the business you're in? And again, be honest with that business and what that business is doing. If you're going to have a huge clash there, then that's probably going to be an issue. Purpose, it's a bit Baz Luhrmann, but you might not know what you want to do, but try and figure out, like I was thinking about my purpose. So actually, I really enjoy helping others. That is something I really enjoy. It's something I enjoy in the military. It's something I enjoy at Amazon. It's something I enjoy at home. I enjoy helping my kids. I enjoy helping my kids' friends. That is a big part for me. And finding my purpose in life is to do with that. It's not linked to my financial remuneration. It's not linked to my career per se, but it's an important part of it. And because I know that, I can then target where I want to go and what I want to do. And I think the other one is, particularly and this is more relevant to the military, but not entirely, is recognise that you're not actually as resistant to change as you probably think you are. In the military, we learn stuff every year. You go on a training package for how to do this. It might be fighting in a built-up area, it might be a new vehicle, or it might be whatever it is. And that will involve new tactics and a new way. You'll get new camouflage, which means you have to do something in a different way. This is a huge amount of change, and recognise that when you get into the civilian world, you can change much faster, and they will need to, because there is, at the end of the day, a profit that needs to be driven there. But it's also about doing things better, doing things more effectively, more safely. It's about making conditions better. And if you can kind of get that into your head, that actually I can make an impact through what I do, then I think that really helps you understand where you position yourself in the market and what you want to look for. And recognise you'll probably make mistakes on the way as well.
I think we're so used to change. I think that's one of the things which really helps with the whole sort of resilience factor. Because in the military, you're changing jobs every couple of years, which probably means a change of team and probably means a change of location as well. And so that very sort of physical, practical change is something that we're incredibly used to. And it's not always the same in civilian life, although I think it's getting more so. People are moving jobs and moving organisations a lot more now. So to know that you've got that practical experience in your back pocket, I think is really helpful. But it's recognising that and knowing that is a strength that you can bring. And I think there's something as well for me about that clarity around why you're leaving. What are the push and pull factors? And there's usually a combination of both in terms of not necessarily how is the military pushing you out, but what do you feel is pushing you out and wanting to leave the organisation that you've spent a few years in, and that has probably been pretty fundamental for you in shaping you as an adult. And then what are the pull factors from civilian life that are attracting you out? Because I think once you're clear about those, you will understand what change you want, which is informing the decision as to why you're leaving. And it's something I mentioned before about then, that gives you that control over that decision. And I think a lot of what I've seen of people leaving is there's the blaming other people, and then there's the expectation that the path out will be done for you. And it's just not the case, and it shouldn't be, because we're grown adults and you're looked after so well in the military that it can be a little bit of a shock when you leave that suddenly actually you've got to do everything for yourself, regardless of how good an organisation is, how great their HR department or not is. You've got to take ownership of your decisions. So I think having that clarity, understanding what change you want to make, will make it much easier for you to achieve that change. And then, as Matt said, if it doesn't work out first time in your first choice of career, do something about it. Make a change, try something else. We've all done it. We've all done a few different things.
So almost see it as you know, because you say change is practically part of everyday life. So just think, right, I will change and adopt that attitude, however uncomfortable it might feel initially.
I can do it because I've done it before, but also I'm doing it purposefully. You know, so coming back to what Tony was saying, because I know roughly what direction I want to follow.
And resilience is key. Kate, you've just mentioned it there. And for you, Matt, it's been a very personal challenge in terms of the company over the past years. And, well, just talk us through a little bit.
Well, it was about not far from this time last year when everything just ground to a halt. So we'd built up the business over sort of 6 years or so to a stage where all the hard work was sort of starting to pay off. We had a really good team. We had clients who were very loyal to us and had helped us grow, and Deloitte being one of them, of course. And we were in a stage where we were doing really good work, really proud of what we were doing, and had a very good team. And it was just as things aligned that it all sort of ground to a halt. And I remember getting to Birmingham Airport to run a course down in Herefordshire. And when I turned my phone on, I had about 12 missed calls, which is really rare. I'm not that popular. And sort of it was a combination of a couple of clients and the people we worked with just saying, we've had a course cancelled. I said, oh, well, that happens. It's like, no, it's the course today. And then there's one next week and then one the week after. And then I was okay, that's strange. And it was something that came on the news that day about the lockdown coming in. And within the space of 2 weeks, 2 years worth of programs had just been sort of cancelled. So I was sat in the airport thinking, oh, okay, what are we going to do now? And I got home just before the lockdown kicked in. And we had some really difficult decisions to make, both on a personal and a professional level, because you can't just turn things off. You've got people to pay, bills to pay. And that was real test of resilience for everybody involved. And luckily our core team is all ex-military. And it was more of, it did feel like being back in the military at that time, where we assessed the situation. We literally looked at our courses of action. We got 3 courses of action we can take. Do we do this one? Do we do this one? And I did feel like I was back back there, sort of on a knee, sort of, right, what are we going to do? And we were practicing what we preached. We having to come up with a plan. We having to execute it with a high level of risk. And we didn't do the easy option, which is just a sort of a managed withdrawal, sort of close everything down. We borrowed relatively heavily. We sorted our personal finances out and invested in the technology that we thought would allow us to continue what we're doing, taking a bit of a gamble that this lockdown was going to last a little bit longer than a month. And then looking at what things do we think are going to continue. So we looked at government-funded training. It's like, yeah, people are going to want free stuff. So we made some huge assumptions about what was going to happen. And about 3-4 months into borrowing a lot of money and making these huge assumptions, it was still completely flat. So we were still at the stage of maybe our sort of very bold and expeditionary approach. Maybe it's going to come back and bite us. So literally looking at potentially selling houses, or how do we dig ourselves out of this mess? And then slowly but surely, it started to pay off. And we suddenly went from the problem of, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay the mortgage when the mortgage holiday finishes, to we need to recruit some people. We need to see who is sort of our network we can sort of get back in quite quickly. We need somebody who can do technology a bit better than us because we're terrible at it. So who's going to be available? And a lot of the people we brought back in, as we've done earlier on, were ex-military. And that backbone of people who can make decisions with limited information, have the confidence to carry it through, but also the humility to say when they get it wrong or when they need help. Big part of the Tony made. That core military backbone allowed us to get through as an organisation. And now as an employer, I'd rather train people who've got energy, who are willing to sort of take a bit of risk personally and throw themselves at something, rather than bring somebody in ready-made on the training side who doesn't sort of share that same sort of way of doing things. It also means it's a far more pleasant and exciting environment to work in, where anybody can feel empowered because they're used to that mission command principle of, this is what you're working in, just come up with the answers, do what you want to. It's such a more exciting environment when you've got people coming up with really good ideas or doing things and feeling empowered to do so. So the training of Sandhurst, the training of being in the military, all of that, I would say probably has been more useful in the last 12 months than for a significant part of my military career. And I know a lot of my colleagues feel the same way. It'd be interesting to see, work in a big organisation like Tony has, whether that's sort of been quite similar.
And it's also a reminder, as much as, hearing all of your incredible stories at the beginning, it's a reminder that each of your journeys has not been without challenge and things to overcome. And that even comes, as you've both mentioned, from psychological support too. So there shouldn't really be any barriers in that regard. And you've just mentioned that about not being afraid to ask for help. So Kate and Tony, in that regard, can I ask you just to share a little bit about that? Because it's not been a smooth journey to this point. You all sound terribly successful now. But the journey, you've had a journey the same as everybody else who might be listening, thinking, well, is it, it's not been easy, is basically what I'm trying to say.
No, you're absolutely right. But actually, if we think about resilience, for me, it's sort of a tripartite thing in that it's physical, mental and emotional. And I think physically and mentally, I've always been pretty strong, but emotionally not so much. And actually, this isn't as a result of my injury. I think this is a result partly of just who I am anyway, and kind of, no, suppress all that, and let's just crack on. But of course, that was perfect for the army. And so the army, I think, has, and this is not speaking bad of the army, but I just think it attracted me as that type, and then probably encouraged and grew that behaviour. So asking for help is hugely important, and it doesn't come naturally. I'm sure I speak for the three of us when I say that, is in that we as individuals are probably attracted to the army, and it's attracted to us because of that. And you are expected to use your initiative, as Matt was just talking about, and crack on and identify courses of action and make decisions with limited information and be comfortable with that. And what's not as comfortable is, as Tony was saying earlier about his experience of, it took his soldiers to run and say, boss, stop blaming yourself. You had to have that help forced upon you, didn't you? And it has been much the same for me as well. And it's recognising that it's not a weakness to ask for help. And I think often when you're leading others, it's so much easier because you take the attention off you and you focus all of your energy on your soldiers. Whereas as soon as you're forced to kind of put yourself in the spotlight again, that's when it becomes tricky. And the thing that really highlighted that for me, or the experience that highlighted that, was an expedition that I did to Antarctica as part of my rehab. And, I was just a member of the team. So there was no kind of being the leader and getting your leader's legs on and finding that extra 10% when you're having the most physically horrific time possible. Because you're only concentrating on you, and there's no role modelling, there's no setting the example. And that's actually a lot harder, I found. So focusing on self again is really difficult because we just don't particularly do it in the military. And so learning to kind of reach out, identify what you need to ask for help for and who you can go to for that is a huge step, I think. And there's so much help out there. And even if that's just to the point of, as you're going through your resettlement process, starting to do that whole networking piece. And I know it's a horrendous word that we all hate, but it really works and it's really important. And an early piece of advice I was given was, don't worry about the whole paying it back, think about paying it forward. And I've taken that with me, over the last few years. And I love now making connections for people and reiterating that and saying, you don't have to do anything for me in return, but you will do something for someone else in the future.
It's a really, really good point. Can I just throw in there? I went on an expedition to Antarctica as part of my rehab. As you do.
I mentioned I'm a bit emotionally unstable, right?
just extraordinary. I want to mention storytelling, actually, because I think it's a really important thing for people to take away as well. And I've just lost what my last point was, what you just mentioned there.
The whole paying it forward.
Paying it forward, thank you. Because I get that all the time. I don't think I know anybody who's ever received an email from anybody, and my husband included, he's former military, when someone reaches out and says, I just need a bit of advice, can I grab 20 minutes? I don't know, I've never said no to that. So I think it is, as you say, just reaching out and just saying, can I grab, I've got now 3 people that I mentor because they reached out to me and just asked, and each of them said, I'm really embarrassed to ask, and I'm thinking this would be great. So it's just to ask. Sorry, Tony, I wanted to bring you in on that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and I definitely made time, and I know, certainly at Amazon, but also the wider military network. That's true. Get on LinkedIn, get on those other sites. People do want to help. We've got a massive, across the world, huge kind of military affinity group that kind of recognise, there are certain things that veterans get, right? Irrelevant of what country you're from or whether countries are for each other or whatever. Like there's certain things you get and understand. I think one of the interesting things in the last year, and this is coming at it from a kind of big business point of view that's done well, is that fragility is when you repeatedly put something or someone under stress and they end up breaking because of that stress, right? It makes it weaker every time. And there's another way of looking at it, which is actually, can I be someone where if you put me under more and more stress, I can actually learn from that, learn how I did well, learn how I responded, test myself and become stronger as a result. And that was something that we took on board quite literally early on in the pandemic. We knew that the demand would be going up for customers. We knew that people needed this support, and actually what was going to get people through the pandemic would vary massively depending on the individual. Right? It wasn't just a case of, we need to send antibacterial wipes and face masks. It's things, it might be books, to really help people. It might be coaching guides, it might be whatever it might be. And therefore we needed to keep going, but we needed to do it safely. So how are we going to protect our employees? How are we going to protect or help the wider country and the countries we operate in get through this? And so the teams are all bouncing ideas, and they're coming in from left and right of field. This and this, and we can do these arcs. We can put in place these. How much does it cost versus, okay, actually, yeah, but do we need to do it? We need to do it now, right? Time's pressing, let's move. And we implemented a lot of new processes. And initially it might be that they were going a bit more slowly than we hoped, or it might be that they needed to be tinkered with, and this isn't quite perfect. But again, it's that sort of, there's a military ethos of 80%. I need 80% of the information, I'm good to go. Because you're never going to get to 100%, so let's just meet somewhere and make a decision. And we did that, and we're now at the point where we've got all these COVID protocols in place. We've done a huge amount as a business, as a leadership team, and the associates themselves, what they've gone through to make it safe. And we're operating at maximum capacity to try and support what people need and do it as safely as possible. And actually some of these processes have improved on what we had before, pre-pandemic. And that makes you then realise, okay, again, change and challenge can make me stronger, can make us better, because it presents us with different opportunities and different challenges, different obstacles we have to overcome. Exactly what you went through in the military. You go left flanking, the enemy are there, I need to go right. I need to call in some help from Kate's bunch in the artillery, I need that now. You've been through these things before, it's just they were wearing a different costume. So my advice to the veterans, not necessarily soliciting it, but my advice to them is, look at the processes that you're using, not the exact output or inputs that you're putting in place. The military, we're incredibly poor on data. We don't do data very well in the military. But actually, if you think about it, there are lots of things, lots of stories, and stories is where it's at, stories is what drives humanity forward. There are lots of stories of where you have used your intuition, you have used factors you can see, and when you're doing a plan, you have used data, you've analysed what's in front of you, and you've made a plan based on that data and that information that's been presented to you. So you can do it, and you have done it. And there might be new skills like Excel. We don't, very basic in the military, generally speaking. There's lots of skills that you might have to bone up on and improve. But the way that you make decisions, the way that you look at information is hugely relevant to a successful business.
Yeah. I think part of the problem, Kate, if I may, is actually less often from the veteran side, because there is a certain amount of help to identify this, when you're going through resettlement and when you're leaving the military. So a lot of this is perhaps stuff that that people have heard before, but I think on the flip side of that, from the employer's point of view, it's really getting them to recognise that all the soft skills, which is basically what we've been talking about, are born of years of training and experience. And you don't get that from any person that walks in off the street. So that is the advantage, I think, that people from a military background bring to you. The sort of the hard technical skills. So when you're looking at prospective CVs and you say, well, this person's got this qualification, so I'm going to take them over this ex-military, is so short-sighted in my view, because you get somebody in with the soft skills that you're not going to be able to train them up on that in a 3-week course. but you can send them off on the 3-week course to do that technical qualification. And the value that you'll get out of that individual, because of all of their soft skills, years of experience, will be realised so much more quickly than the technical person who hasn't got the leadership and management that we bring.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, recognising, and this really does touch on soft skill, not only the effective listening, but the ability to read what type of person is needed in a situation. Right, so you can go from, I need to be the stern leader who's just dictating, like, this needs to happen now because it's a crazy day and I need to put some order into it, or actually I need to be an empathetic leader right now and I need to listen. I just need to pin my ears back and listen. And like Kate said, you've been through those examples before, you've done those repeatedly, and therefore your ability to be a malleable person, a malleable leader based on the situation rather than just fixated on something is there in spades, and it's a wonderful asset to an employer to have.
I think it's key is that translating that is conveying that, isn't it? So as you've said, employers need to be aware of it, and then also we as individuals need to be aware of it in terms of what we're bringing with CV. So as we draw to a close, let's see if we can drill down. If I can ask you, we've covered so much ground, but what 3 points from each of you would you like people listening to take away? Feel free, whether you want to direct it at the employer or whether the prospective employees, we should maybe put it, but what 3 points would you like people to take away who are listening? I might add my first one, which is just storytelling. Listening to the three of you at the start of this podcast, for me, was the most powerful thing I think I could have heard if I was an employer, to think, wow, you've done all of that. I would then be asking myself, how can I bring you into my organisation? Because I know you're going to bring a wealth of experience and knowledge and skills. It's my responsibility to see how I can, to utilise that. If so, I think don't be afraid to tell your story. It's obviously what I do in communications. It's sort of within television. It's the most powerful thing we can do. So your experience, and talking to people listening, your experience is really absolutely what counts. So don't be afraid to tell your story. That's my little 2
Well, I'll go first, ladies first, just in case you nick mine. I think my 3 would be first 2 from the veterans' point of view, which is first of all that clarity about what change it is that you want. We talked a lot about change today, and when you're leaving the military, it's because you want something different. So what is that? What change do you want to see? Because that then helps you to achieve your goals, to achieve that change. Secondly, would be about not being afraid to ask for help. And then thirdly, from the employer's perspective, picking up on what you were just talking about, Kate, actually helping those ex-military candidates to tell their story. So having so educating yourself around, what you think an ex-military person can bring for you, but then really allowing them, kind of giving them the floor to tell their story.
Matt?
I think to the person leaving, it's that boldness, that audacity, that tenacity that got you to go in the first place, to stick your hand up and say, yeah, I'm going to do that for a few years of my life. You've got to get that back and realise that you can turn that to absolutely anything. And it's just be bold. You're going to get out, and the army will, or the military will always be an important part of your identity, but don't let it define you completely. Put it to one side, use it, keep it almost like your secret weapon, and then think, how else am I going to make my mark and move forward? And the people I see succeeding have done that. They're really proud of what they've achieved. They've always got those links. They'll always use it for the network, but they'll go forward and there'll be a success in something else. And having that self-efficacy, that understanding that, gosh, you've already excelled. You've already put yourself on a pedestal for pursuing that career. You can do it in anything else. And just remembering that, I think is really important. And I think from the employer's point of view, you'd be absolutely nuts not to tap in to this ridiculously trained, motivated, high energy group of individuals. And from my point of view, I'm really happy that there's only a few organisations, I think Amazon being one, Deloitte maybe being another, who've actually tapped into this almost like goldmine of talent. And organisations that aren't doing that are really, really missing the trick, because you've got a highly trainable, highly adaptable, highly motivated workforce, and there's plenty of them. So, why wouldn't you? And I'm going to go for 2, not for 3, I'm afraid. I'm just going to break the mould a little bit. I can't think of a third.
Beautiful, thank you, Matt.
I think this goes to both the individuals and the employers as well. I think first and foremost, we're in a group where you're veterans or you're about to become a veteran or whatever. But first and foremost, you're an individual. And you will have strengths and you will have weaknesses. Understand what those are. There are guys and girls I know who are fantastic artists and they serve. There are soldiers I know who made a lot of money while they were serving, playing the stock market, and just a private soldier, because they have an inkling for it. Like, recognize that we are an incredibly diverse range of people with different skills and different passions, and not just a single homogenous mass that is trained as some sort of clockwork machine, because that's not what the military is. It's not. It never has been. You just look at history, look at the First World War and the poets that came out of it, look at the artists. We're a really diverse group of people. I think, secondly, to the veterans, and this touches on what Kate says, is, for me, it's about recognize that you might not understand your purpose, but try, and you will make mistakes on that path. You won't get it right every time, but work towards what that is. For some people, it might really be the work that is it. It's that precise bit of work. But for others, it might be a feeling. It might be an emotion. It might be some sort of state of being that you want to be in. You want to be that person. For me, it's to help others. And I think finally to employers is, I know that there is some degree of skepticism, some degree of unknown with the military, and I think that sometimes gets pushed around the sort of mental health, PTSD element of things. And I think, again, recognise that most people who've served don't have that and don't present it. There might be other mental health issues and whatever, but no more than the rest of the population. So please don't let that be a barrier to why you would hire someone. We do not all come with mental scars. Some of us come with physical scars. Not many of us, again, as a population, as a percentage of the population. So look past that and recognise that the skills, the experience, and the abilities that we can bring to your business will be told through our stories. They might not be data rich. They might not have all the vernacular that you want them to have, but nonetheless, they will be gripping stories that can really, really improve your business and push you forward to success.
Thank you so much to my guests today, Tony Harris, Matt Johns, and Kate Philp. In our next and final episode, we'll take stock of where we are with veteran employment, the progress that has been made so far, as well as looking to the future. I hope you'll join me then on Veterans Work, the podcast. Bye-bye.